Hey everyone, this is John from mk.II, and I'm here today with a cartoon caricaturized German Panzer II light tank. The model that you see here is built for my own personal collection and it's not for sale and or purchase. However, like I often mention in these build videos, I frequently take on commission build projects from models ranging between 1/35 scale and 1/6 scale. For availability and pricing information, that information would be best by contacting me through the email address listed below, which is info@eastcoastarmory.com. The model that you see here is built predominantly out of the box, and we'll be going over all of the kit's features as well as giving this model a thorough in-box review. So stay tuned because there's going to be a little bit of info coming right at you. To kick this video off, let's go ahead and take a quick walk around this model. And this vehicle here is the German Panzer II light tank. Or at least it's supposed to be. What this vehicle is, it's a caricaturized version of the Panzer II from the video game War Toons. And if you take a look at your calendar, you'll see that the date that this video is posted is none other than April 1st, 2023, which makes this video part of the ECA channel's tradition of these caricaturized models posted on April Fool's Day. War Toons is a VR video game. It's been around for a number of years now. It was originally on the PlayStation. However, over the last few years, things have changed with the developers, also with the platform that the game is posted on. More information can be found on the War Toons Facebook page, as well as, I believe, their website. However, what's interesting about the game is that it has this very unique art style, where everything is in a caricaturized format. As you can see from this model over here, it definitely has the look, the feel, and the vibe of the vehicle in question, in this case being a Panzer II, but it's with these crazy weird proportions, and however, it just seems to work on every one of the vehicles in the lineup. Shortly after the game came out, the creator went ahead and contacted several of the plastic model companies out there to see if they're interested in producing any licensed merchandise for his video game. One of the companies that answered the mail was Meng. Meng is known in the plastic modeling world to create some very high quality and unique plastic model kits. So it was very interesting to see them undertake a project like this. The Meng kits have been around now for a number of years, and the product range just keeps on growing, which is fantastic. All of the Meng kits do a fantastic job with translating and adapting the video game files and the video game model to an actual vehicle that can be made as a plastic model kit. It definitely transfers very well, and they have all of the same look and feel of the ones in the game, but with the nice detail quality levels that are found on the Meng plastic models. In addition to that, the kits are designed to be very easily assembled, and the Meng kits have all of these attributes in spades. Before we go any further with the video, let's go ahead and take a step back to when this model was first started in order to get a good idea on what the base starter kit supplies you with. And here's the model at the start of the build. For the base starter kit, I'll be utilizing this Meng War Toons caricaturized Panzer II light tank. Clearly, this model here is one of those caricaturized kits that have been produced by the Meng Model Company as a licensed product for the War Toons video game. The War Toons brand at this point is actually one that's getting up there in age. It's been out there for, or I should say Meng has been producing kits in this range now for almost 8 years, I guess, if I'm just ballparking. So, you know, the range has actually been growing quite well, and there are a number of really interesting kits that are out there, most of which I've already built and have videos on and can be found on the channel. Regardless, this one here is actually one of the newer kits that have been released by Meng, and I think this kit came out, I want to say a year ago, if that. So these are relatively really new. This model here is a really new addition to the stash. I purchased it off of eBay about a month ago. It finally came in from overseas, so it's about time I actually get to this one because, you know, I really want to make this one completed and edited by the time April 1st rolls on in. This kit here I acquired off of eBay. Generally, that's probably some of the best places to find not just these kits, but most of the model kits. As I mentioned in most of these videos, I tend to be scrolling eBay quite often for the detriment of my stash, but regardless, these kits are fairly easily come by. Generally, you can find them in some online stores, or I should say most brick and mortar stores, but generally you can find these on most online choices. Places such as eBay, Amazon, any other type of online hobby shop should be able to yield some pretty good results for these. Hobby Lobby have been selling these War Toons kits in the past. However, they tend to sell either the Sherman or the Tiger and sometimes the Panther, not so much the other kits in their lineup. So if you are looking to collect these kits, you are going to have to look outside of the brick and mortar type format in order to acquire the majority, or I should say the remainder of the collection. Fortunately, these kits are so very easily found, and when found are fairly affordable. This one here was under 20 bucks or so. So these kits are, that's basically a going rate for them. These kits are also renowned for their simplicity, and this has been the case with the other kits in the lineup that I've done in the past, and I'm pretty sure this one here will follow suit, but we'll see how that turns out as the video continues. Starting with the box art and graphic design, as I generally always mention these World War Toons kit videos, the box art is actually engineered in a certain way to make it very appealing for a shelf type display. So if you note, we have the box art here in the center, and then we have these two diagonal lines that come on either end. Well, this is done on purpose. This is so that you can line up more than one of these models like this in a retail type setting, or if you're just a collector and you like to have the box art displayed on a shelf, you can see how it has a nice visual appearance, specifically if you have a bunch of them, and it creates this like non-stop banner that runs across. And it's a very interesting little design cue that Meng incorporated on their kits. This is something that can be seen on all the World War Toons kits, so if you acquired the whole collection, you can have the box arts displayed with them, and it'll create some interesting aesthetics. The one thing I do want to mention is that I've seen some of the earlier release kits, namely the Tiger, the Panther, and the Sherman, and on those I've seen the same exact graphic design here, however the color is brown as opposed to the black found on the other iterations that are out there. And this also has changed with those exact same kits. They are also sold in the exact same format, but instead of brown, we have a black banner. Pretty sure there's a reason for that. Mr. James, who is the creator of this video game, will gladly be able to explain more than I can. And by the way, in case you are interested, a shameless plug, I interviewed Mr. James Chung about a year ago, and we talked about the video game and where it's at, and it's actually a really cool conversation that I had with him, and that video can be found on the ECA channel. In fact, I'll have a link for that video listed below. So back to the Panzer II here. As I stated before, here we have the Panzer II. It's in its stylized format, and it's in the exact same type of art style that we see with the other box arts in the World War Toons range. We have a nice little painterly relief of the vehicle in question. The other graphic design is typical, again, for all the other World War Toons kits. Here we have the Meng logo. It's kit number WWT-019. It's amazing, we're almost at 20 kits now. I believe so. I believe we're almost at 20. I have to do a head count of the ones in my collection. But here we have the World War Toons logo and this gear motif with the blue banner over here. This blue color does change depending on the kit. Sometimes it's green, sometimes it's blue. Depends on the vehicle in question, of course. Here we have the cool little typeface here describing what the vehicle is. Of course, this is a German Panzer II light tank. On the side tab over here, we have a expanded version of the box art in question with the information right here, and it is a mirror image on the opposite side. On the side of the box, we have a little diagram on what the model will look like once fully built and painted. And again, it has the look and proportion of a Panzer II that's been caricaturized. Here we have the game developer, which is Rascali. On the older kits, this was another company called Rookfan, and as for why that's the case, well, again, I recommend watching the interview I do with Mr. James Chung. And there you can see the history of his company. On the opposite side here, we have some other kits found in the World War Toons lineup. We have a Panzer III, the Tiger I, and the King Tiger. And as another quick shameless plug, I've actually done an example of all three of these kits, and they can be found on the ECA channel in the miscellaneous model playlist, where it has all of the World War Toons kits, as well as some of the other interesting builds that I've done in the past. We also have and we have the Panther over here, which again is another kit that I built that's in their lineup, and again, it was actually a pretty fun build at that. Outside of that, this takes us to the rear tab over here. We have a nice advert of the video game in question, and here we have a little thumbnail of the vehicle in-game with the in-game graphics, which again looks pretty cool. Here we have the remainder of the info. It's Olga approved, as are all the other World War Toons kits, as well as the other information that we have presently. Opening up the model is a side opening box, as what's typically seen on these World War Toons models. We have this is an interesting little receipt-ish thing that popped out. Never seen one before. It's all written in Chinese or Mandarin. So, I'll just take that for what it is. Let me pour out the contents. Just like with the other World War Toons kits, everything is self-contained in this nice little bag over here. This one here is hermetically sealed, as are typically seen on the other World War Toons kits, with the exception of the chaffee that I just opened up prior to filming this one here, and that one was stapled together for what that's worth. The plastic is actually ABS plastic found on these kits. It is not polystyrene. So it's a little bit different compared to some of the other plastic models that are out there. This doesn't really play too much in with the adhesives that are used. I tend to use super glue for everything, so it bonds with everything. But if you are using a certain type of debonder, it may have a problem with this plastic. But generally, when you're building one of these, you shouldn't have to need any debonder, because these kits do build extremely well and pretty much effortlessly. Okay, so opening up the baggie, I have some loose parts over here. Okay, the bag's empty. Excellent. So here you get to see the kit's components. Starting with the lower hull, just like with the other World War Toons kits, it is a chunky little tooling here. It's a single piece molding, which is something that you see on some of the newer tooling kits as opposed to some of the first generation ones where this was a multi-part assembly. The multi-part assembly works, of course, however, there does require a little bit more seam removal as opposed to a single molding like the one we have presently. As for the thicknesses, one thing I like about the thickness of these kits, makes for a nice little sturdy, chunky little build, and it just has just a feeling of quality to it and a little bit more robustness, and that's something that I really do appreciate with these models. This one here is a copyright of 2022, right there on the inside. And I believe at the time of filming this, this is the newest kit that was released in the World War Toons lineup. Slide from there takes us to the turret, which, I don't know, reminds me of a Porsche 911 for some reason. I guess with the way it's shaped. But regardless, it definitely has the look and feel of, again, the Panzer II. We have the commander's hatch over here. It has the hook type hinge. The hook hinges have worked on the other builds I've done in the past. However, I always found them to be a little bit on the frailer end, in that the hinge doesn't really lock in a secure way, and they generally can fall out if you're not paying attention. So this is something you want to pay attention to if you're building one of these models. But in the past, the hinges do work, and they do operate as advertised, but it's something that can wear out as the unit is functioning. So other than that, the piece looks great. We have some nice rivet molding, or rivet detailing molded on. And, it has all the little indexing points for all the various bits of equipment that are going to be mounted to this model as the build continues. Here we have the upper hull molding right there. It's all encompassing. We have a bunch of details integrally molded on with the tin work, with the way it's bent up. It looks pretty cool. And we also have the rear hatch right there in the back. Everything is squished and stylized again for the art style of the video game. It's part of the charm of these kits. Here we have the lower turret pan. We got a little bit of tow cable detailing, as well as an antenna and a bunch of other odds and ends, including the mantlet and the armament. The armament is fully drilled out right here on the main armor, but also on the coax. This is something that's actually a new feature found on these kits. In the past, these just molded solid, and I would just have to go in there with a pin vise in order to drill it out. So that's a very nice feature that it has. I don't know if I'm partially responsible for that, since I was talking about it in these videos. And I know Mr. James Chung watches these videos, and if you are, hey bro, how's it going? But outside of that, yeah, it's a very nice feature that these pieces are molded in the hollow state. It's a very nice touch. Here you have the wooden antenna channel right over here. It's funny how miniature it is. It's almost like it's 1/72nd scale, but again, that's part of the charm on these kits. The next one we have here is a sprue that contains the running gear. So here we got just the running gear, no more, no less. It definitely has the look and feel of the Panzer II with the way the sprockets are laid out. And the idlers do have all those little rigidity braces that are present on the actual unit, and again, stylized on the model that we have here. Here we have the, I presume, are the return rollers. They have some nice hub detailing on them. And we do have some suspension details, which appear to be some kind of a swing arm or I believe they're leaf springs on the actual Panzer II, but we'll see how that pans out as the build continues. Just like with the other models, we have the hubcaps here, which are designed so that you can glue the thing permanently in place, but the wheel can still fully rotate. And the hubcaps themselves do have some nice fastener details integrally molded on. We have some separate tools right over there, which will make painting and weathering them a lot easier compared to if they were integrally molded in place. Running around loose, we got here a little storage bin. It's got a cool little handle molded in, as well as the exhaust manifold. And again, excellent bit of engineering, I must say. The exhaust is molded in the hollow state. Very nice little touch indeed. Saves me a little bit of time. We also have a loose little hubcap. Don't want to lose that. And then this brings us to the tracks. The tracks are single-piece vinyl, which are quite typically seen on the other World War Toons kits and are excellent, and it's one of my favorite aspects on these models. I don't have to do any link and link nonsense. And The tracks do have the look and feel of a Panzer II, but again, with the stylized art style that we have here. Wait till that bad boy gets into focus. There we go. And you can see the detailing that is present. Although this is a cartoonish type vehicle, the quality of the moldings is excellent. And it just, it's using, well, modern production and molding technology in order to create the kits that we have here. We have some nice detailing here on the sides. And we do have some inner detailing, and unlike several of the other World War Toons kits where we just have some generic little dividers every few centimeters or millimeters or so, this one here, it's much more densely packed, and it just makes for a nicer looking build overall. I also like how they are a literal single piece molding. There's no connection points, and it's just a little bracelet like type format. And in the past, these always worked out very, very well. The next one takes us to the water slide decals right over here. These decals are made with modern decal printing type technology, and that means that in the past, on not just the World War Toons lineup, but also on the other Meng kits I've done, the decal quality has been excellent, and I'm pretty sure this one here is going to yield for similar results. Carrying on takes us to the instruction manual, and just like with the other kits in the World War Toons lineup, the instructions are very nicely done and laid out compared to the other contemporary kits on the market, even the ones from Meng, where generally when you open up an instruction sheet, be it from a modern super kit or from a vintage kit, you'll have either some CAD drawings or some hand-drawn drawings, depending on the age and vintage of the model. For this one here, it's a little bit more, well, shall we say, has more showmanship. As you can see, we have a lot more color on this one over here. And the layout is very nicely executed. Here we have the CAD files. I like how they highlight everything in yellow. That does make their building a bit more easily done. And in the past, I've had some very good results with the instructions here. I haven't seen any misprints or anything. At times, depending on the build, I've had to fudge a little bit of the assembly format depending on the kit in question. However, for the Panzer II here, I don't think that's going to be necessary, and I should be able to just, monkey see, monkey do my way through the entire build. With the exception of the tracks. I always put those on the very tail end of the build, and there's reasons for that I generally mention in my videos. But regardless, yeah, I'm not anticipating any sort of complications with this one. And with the model fully completed, you really get a sense of what this thing looks like in its final form. And basically, this is a what you see is what you get type of fare, which again is quite typical for these World War Toons tanks. Regardless, let's go ahead and just, go in closer and see what some of the kit's features are. So starting with the suspension on this model went together like a breeze. The components are very nicely detailed, and they do again have the overall look and feel of the Panzer II suspension. The model does have some role and playability to it with the way the tracks are designed, as also with the way the parts are nice and robust. However, if I go ahead and do that, I'm just going to chip the paint off of the tracks. That's something that I really don't want to undertake. The tracks are painted with Tamiya flat black as a base coat. Like I always mention, you don't want to use spray paint on tracks like this or enamels in general, as these can potentially harm the rubber of the tracks, and it's definitely something that you want to avoid at all costs. Unlike some other kits out there where if the tracks fall apart on you, you have workable track links or a single piece vinyl option. For World War Toons tanks here, it's not really the case, so that's definitely something you really want to avoid at all costs. However, the tracks are painted with the Tamiya flat black, and then with the steel, or I should say the aluminum paint, I dry brush that onto the surface. And once the paint is dried, it gives you for the look that we have here. Also, because I do want to mention this, the aluminum I use is a spray paint. And I just, I spray paint on a board and I use the brush as an applicator in the dry brushing method. That will not affect the tracks simply because it is thoroughly coated with the Tamiya acrylic. It kind of acts as a barrier and prevents any sort of problems in that regard. Back to the model over here, the tracks are very nicely detailed, and, again, they give a nice overall look and feel of the vehicle in question. The rubber tires are painted with the look of rubber, which is only painted on the top portion, and the side sections I left in the Panzer color just because of, the cartoony nature of the model. For the rear idler wheel, I went ahead and did something similar, but with the use of silver paint, as again, on the real vehicle, these are steel rimmed, and you will not see rubber found on these sections here. Hopping to the rear section takes to the exhaust manifold. The exhaust manifold here is the stock original component. Really nothing was done to it. Even the exhaust section is pre-drilled out as we saw before. The only thing that I did was weather it accordingly, and then that's basically all there is to it. On the bow section, we now have a little bit of extra detailing, and this is where this model is simple, yet a little bit complex at the same time. The detailing for the tow cable is very nicely engineered in that it's not just integrally molded onto the bow section, as you would see on some of the older World War II's models, or even some other kits out there on the market that are, in a similar simplicity level as this one here. This one, the cable is a two-piece assembly where we have the cable with its cable mounts integrally molded on. It just plugs onto the model over here, and then you have this hook mechanism that has a separate piece and it just clips directly into place. It bridges the tow cable eye with the little tow shackle that we have right there on the front. And once it's added, it does the job absolutely nicely. The piece, admittedly, is a little bit more, it adds a little bit more complexity to the model compared to just having it as a single type molding, but it does lend itself for some very nice detailing. And probably this, along with the antenna, maybe the little MG over here, are some of the more frail bits on the model. So if you're looking to play with this thing, chances are really good this is probably going to be one of the first things that break off. But I did want to mention it at this point, as it does add some very nice detailing to the build overall. From there, moves us up to the headlights. Again, stock units just drop directly in place. And we also have here a no-tech light. Interestingly enough, I believe the no-tech light, the kit wants you to install it in reverse. So this was something I obviously took care of right away, and I mounted it in the proper method where it has the cutout section pointing towards the front. Carrying on with the remainder of the tin work detailing takes to the Pioneer tools. We have a shovel over here, a pry bar over here, and I believe this is some kind of other tool. If not, it may be a grab handle, because there's another one found here on the turret. Regardless, all these components I just mentioned are separate moldings, which is excellent because this allows you to paint them off of the model, and then you could just drop them on place once the model is fully painted at the tail end of the build, like I always do on my models. The pieces are very nicely detailed for the cartoony nature of this model, and even though the model itself has this, interesting cartoony art style, the quality of the details are always quite excellent. This brings us right now also to the antenna and the antenna channel. This is an iconic bit of detailing found on the early pattern of German World War II armor, and the antenna channel is actually a wooden component. If anyone ever watched my 1/6 scale Panzer II build, you'll know exactly what I'm referring to. The component is obviously plastic on the model here, but I weathered it in a manner where it looks like it's distressed wood. You can see the wood poking through the paintwork that you see here, and this was done via the dry brush with a little bit of Tamiya red brown. This is something to point out because a lot of people out there may think that this is made out of metal, and that's just not the case. They were wood on basically every one of these German vehicles. Most of the time, the wood was just overpainted with the tank's base coat, but there have been examples where the wood was just left in El Natural color. This is really best left up to the discretion of the builder. Me personally, I like to have it with the overpainted method, but then you can see the wood just popping out through the chip paintwork. As for the antenna base, quite simple, what you expect on these World War II's models. The antenna plugs into the section over here, and on the real vehicle, the antenna can actually pivot down into the channel, which again is the reason why we have this channel over here. Had the idea of making this actually functional, but it just didn't work out on this build. I just simply glued it in place in the permanent position like you see here. Moving up takes us to the turret, and basically the turret detailing here is pretty simple. There's only about 4 or 5 parts on the turret total, so it goes together extremely quickly. The little grab handle here is probably the smallest component next to the MGs. That is something that the builder wants to pay attention to because they could accidentally lose the part or have a crack on them during the installation. Definitely something to watch out for, but other than that, it's basically a pretty simple install nonetheless. The model does have working hatches, as I touched upon before, and hopefully they're not varnished shut. Nope, they're not. There you go. They just open up in that manner. Pretty simple, sweet. What you see is what you get. Once the hatch is clipped in place, as you can see, it does a good job with keeping it where it goes and doesn't flop around when the model is moved around, which is something that's excellent because this will prevent the hatches from getting lost on you if you're, messing around with your model and you open them quite frequently. The next thing I want to mention is the armament. First, the piece can go up and down quite freely, which is a nice little feature. And the other thing I want to mention is that the pieces are very nicely detailed out of the box. The fact that they drilled them out was a very nice touch, as I mentioned before. And outside of that, the only thing I do want to touch upon is that when I was painting the model, these are left off of the model and are really installed at the very tail end, and everything is painted and weathered separately. This is done just to make the paint work a bit easier. The Panzer II's armaments are not painted with the remainder of the vehicle, and they would be their natural color, either be a blued finish or a parkerized finish, depending on, you know, the system in hand. However, regardless, they would definitely not be painted with the paintwork. So just to make paintwork easier, these are painted and weathered off the model, then installed on at the very tail end of the build. And once it's done, it leads for some very nice results. And that's all there is for the detail, and this takes us to the paintwork. For the model's paintwork, being an early war German tank, I definitely wanted to go with all Panzer Gray on this one. Panzer IIs look really sharp in this color, as do most of the German tanks from this era. For the paintwork itself, I actually went ahead and recycled a painting technique that I utilized in another recent build, the Tamiya German 8-wheeled armor car that I posted a little while ago. On that model, I mentioned that the paintwork is actually done with Tamiya acrylics for the base, which was Tamiya Panzer Gray. And then for the weathering work, I gave it a wash of Tamiya light blue, light blue, and that was done in a very thin manner and was used more or less as a filter. I also went ahead and did some sun fading effects done with the airbrush, along with my usual counter shading effects, which are also airbrush applied. The remainder of the weathering work was done with the Tamiya panel line accent, black, and also with just some standard flat black dry brushing to achieve the results that we have here. Other paintwork to mention would be some powder fouling found on the armament, both secondary and main, the little exhaust soot right there on the exhaust manifold, as well as also, I do want to mention, all of the prisms are painted with gloss black to give you the illusion of panzer glass, which we have right here on the front section, and also on several other of the little periscope slits that we have littered around this vehicle. One last thing I want to mention about the paintwork involves the white aerial recognition stripe that we have right here on the rear engine deck. This was something that was done on a number of the German tanks from the early war time frame, and was something I wanted to implement on this build just because it gives the model a really nice visual effect. We have here the remainder of the paintwork, which is all Panzer Gray. It's a solid color, and then right there on the engine deck we have this nice visual spot of the white stripe. The white stripe was added not just for the reasons I just mentioned, but also as kind of a nod to my 1/6 scale Panzer II that I built a number of years ago, and videos of that build can be found on the ECA channel as a quick shameless plug. Regardless, it does a nice job with breaking up the color, and it really gives the model just that much more visual interest. The stripe itself was applied via the paintbrush, and the color is nothing more than flat exterior latex. If anyone have seen the OTR Joseph Stalin 3 build that I have on this channel, I go into detail on how to apply a stripe marking like this, all done with the freehand method. After a few layers of paint are built up, it has the look that we have here, granted that the paint is properly thinned out. And once the stripe is added, then the remainder of the weathering work is applied, which will include the counter shading with the airbrush, as well as also the dry brushing effects that I brushed upon earlier. For the model's markings, these are all the kit supplied water slide decals, and no surprise, the kit supplied decals are excellent. They adhere onto the model without any sort of problems, and then are secured in place with the VMS matte varnish, as they are on the other builds that I've touched upon before from the World War Toons lineup in the past. At the end of the day, I couldn't be any happier in how this one turned out. It's basically quite typical what you'll see on those other World War Toons kits, in that the build experience is one that's very enjoyable. It was a blast to work on, it builds very well, very quickly, and most importantly, very easily. From start to finish, there wasn't really any problems with this build that we have here. Which of course is a hallmark on these World War Toons models, and this one here is no different compared to all the other ones I've built in the past. Which is a perfect point to pivot us into skill level and recommendation. These World War II's models are designed in a way that they can be built by literally anyone, from the person who has never touched a plastic model kit before in their life, to the individual that has several hundreds of them sitting in their collection. Not to mention, of course, anyone else in between. A beginner can tackle one of these models, an intermediate, and so can an advanced. And all of which can have a very good build experience throughout the entire duration. These World War Toons kits have been around for a little while now, and obviously they must be doing something right because they are somewhat popular. Hence, they are always producing new kits out there, it seems like on a yearly basis, which is fantastic. The more options are out there on the market, the better for everyone. These kits have been somewhat popular amongst not just die-hard tank fans like myself, but have also been lately picking up popularity with individuals who do the 40K Warhammer thing, where I've even seen a few of you individuals in my comment section commenting how it's used for orcs or, I'm sorry, I'm not a Warhammer guy, but, you know, all the other factions out there, and they've been taking these tanks and modifying them and making it fit inside that universe, which is also something that's pretty interesting, and it's one that I doubt that even the creator of this video game here and these kits would have ever imagined. Aside from these kits becoming popular with those other types of hobbyists, I've also seen there becoming a cottage industry of aftermarket suppliers out there who have straight up conversion kits and detail hop-ups for the World War Toons tanks, this Panzer II included. I've seen conversion kits to turn vehicles into Martyrs, into Jagdpanthers, and I've seen turned aluminum barrels and other sorts of amenities in order to soup these things up to a condition that, again, I doubt very much the creator of this range of models, or even the video game in general, would have never anticipated when they went ahead and first came up with the kits that we have here. Which is absolutely excellent, because with the availability and cost that these kits do have, this does leave a lot of room for extra hop-ups that, you know, one can add to these models if the individual deems fit. For me personally, I like just rolling with the out-of-the-box kit offering, but again, with the way these models are, you could basically have full creative freedom to do pretty much anything you want with them. And this, I guess, is the perfect point to switch gears now back into recommendations. So for recommendations, if anyone's seen my other World War Toons videos, first I want to say thank you for that. But the other thing I want to say, it's basically copy and paste of what I mentioned in those other videos. So these models here are definitely recommended for anyone who's just an avid fan of just, you know, military vehicle model tank kits. If you do have lots of tank kits in your collection, but are looking to try something a little bit different, you know, have something that's a little fun, and a project that really will take, you know, hardly any time, but have something that's unique and interesting, all the World War Toons kits are definitely going to fit that bill. This Panzer II obviously included. If you're just a fan of the Panzer II, needless to say, this one here would be a nice addition to add to your collection if you have the Tamiya one, the giant 1/6 scale Dragon one, or, you know, any of the other smaller scale ones in between. This one here, again, would fit into that collection and make a nice little footnote in that collection, and it'll be a nice little interesting conversation piece regardless. One type of person who I really don't need to mention, but if anyone who's a fan of the World War Toons video game, needless to say, you're going to dig these kits here. They're awesome, and if you are into the video game, it would be a nice addition to have a nice collection of these models that you like to mess around with in the VR realm. Another person who I'd recommend this kit to would be anyone who is an older modeler, who's someone that has been working on model kits in their youth, left the hobby for one reason or another, but want to enter back into the hobby. These World War Toons kits here are actually a great entry mat back into the hobby. You get to dust off your old skill sets, learn some new skill sets along the way, and do so on a model that's not going to break the bank, and it's also one that's not going to be overly complicated. If you haven't touched a model kit in about 30 or 20 years or so, the last thing you want to do is pick up a modern super kit, pay a small fortune for the thing, and then find out, I'm a little in over my head here, and then the thing never gets built and winds up on eBay where someone like myself purchases it. So that is something that you want to avoid, and the best way to do that is, again, by brushing up on those skill sets by acquiring one or a couple of these World War Toons models here to your collection. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I would definitely recommend this kit for anyone who's just a youth builder and or someone that's trying to get into the hobby of building plastic models. The World War Toons kits are a fantastic entry mat for basically the same reasons that I mentioned for the other individual. You don't really have that much of a budget when you're first starting out, and you're also, again, trying to build up your skill sets as well as some of the tools that you have in order to build these plastic models. Things like snips, needle files, sandpaper, and so on and so forth. The Panzer II over here, it's a somewhat easy model to build, and it's also one that can easily be painted. Unlike most other German tanks where, you need to have an airbrush to apply the camouflage pattern and other sorts of special effects along those lines, the Panzer II here can be painted in Panzer Gray, and fortunately Panzer Gray can be found in a spray paint format, either in an Ace Hardware store in the skies of a dark primer gray, or something similar along those lines. So these vehicles here are very beginner friendly to the point where you can even paint them with very limited painting experience, as well as painting just materials. Like also what I mentioned before, these models do have some playability to them, so if you are someone that is on the younger side and are looking for a fun little project that when you're done with, you can actually have fun and play with this thing, Again, these models here are probably the best models on the market to do so. They are very simplistic. The parts on them are very robust, being made out of ABS plastic. And since the parts are a bit on the chunkier side, it does lend itself to a little bit more robustness. Now, yes, obviously, if you do play with this thing a lot, you are going to start breaking parts and little things along those lines. However, compared to some other plastic model kits on the market, it's definitely less frail in comparison. And the final thing I want to mention about a youth builder, and this is again something that could tie in with an older individual, is that these models here make an excellent gift as well as also a nice little weekend project. If you're someone that's a parent or grandparent or uncle or an aunt and are looking to spend some quality time with your niece or nephew or your grandson or just child, these models here are a fantastic way to do that. They build fast, they build quickly, and it's a great way to spend a nice little afternoon doing something constructive together. Plus, it's a great way to share memories with that individual in mind. And on the topic of a gift, that doesn't stop with someone who is a younger youth builder. If you're the type of person that has a modeler in your life and are looking to get them something that you know they're going to appreciate, and it's probably something that they haven't built yet, well, all the World War Toons models here are a great way to do so. This is the type of thing that you can give as a gift for a birthday or a Christmas or something along those lines, and then you know they'll definitely be able to put one of these together in practically no time, which is something that they too will greatly appreciate. And with that, that wraps up this model showcase video for this caricaturized German Panzer II light tank. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being small scale model showcase videos like this one over here, or the other larger project update videos that frequently get posted to this channel. Another way to keep in loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There, I have more photographs of this particular build, as well as the other smaller and larger scale builds that have been seen on this channel in the past. Furthermore, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again. I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. Till then.